Good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the CDN Design Dialogues Europe on this sunny spring London morning. We've got an amazing program planned for you with over 70 speakers covering 15 interactive sessions. We're going to be taking you inside the design studios for some design reviews. We've got some amazing panel sessions with an eclectic mix of real key people who are going to discuss subjects that affect us across design. And we've got the fireside chat with some of the leading people from our industry, one-to-ones, get to know them closer and better. But really what we need to do is we need to actually show our team that are going to take you through these enthralling sessions. They have a major responsibility. So we have our team at CDN who are going to be looking after you over the next 2 days. We have James, our editor, Mike, our deputy editor, Laura, who's actually going to be in California for us, and Chris Ludwig, editor-in-chief at Ultima Media. So these are the guys who are going to look after you. And please, they will be firing any questions over to the live Q&A during the 2 days. But this is only part of the experience. You know, we'd love to be face-to-face with you. We'd love to be shaking your hands at Geneva or the Milan Furniture Fair. So what we've done is we've created an interactive environment for you over the next 2 days. And to start that, we want to bring up a poll to get you guys engaged, to make you be influencers within our industry. So I've just brought up a poll, which I'm actually going to vote for live. What is the next frontier for car designers to significantly differentiate brands? A, exterior styling, B, interior customization, C, lighting, D, digital interface, and E, materials. Well, let me click which one I want. So there you go. The polls are coming in now, and I'll leave them open just for a few minutes while we're going through the rest of the introduction. Right, so let's take you through the site now. The platform we picked actually gives you the opportunity to engage with people. And if you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, you're actually on the main stage at the moment. And this is actually going to be the situation that you'll have majority of the day. You can also see below that there's a suite section. We're going to be running some live suites where the larger audience, so you guys can get involved. You can actually participate in the suites and engage with fellow participants on the suite section. You can also see the expo part. Now this is a very important part. This is our partners for the event. You can actually click on a partner, you can look at some of their video, and you can actually engage with them, have a virtual meeting. So please spend some time and have a look at that. You can actually find some great innovative partners in that section. Right, so let's go back to the poll. Let's see what the poll results before we head off to our first session. So what do we have here as the results? So it looks like the winner is materials. So interior motors is our love and passion at Car Design News, so materials fits in that. So what I'm going to do now is thank you all and hand you over to James, who's going to run the first session. See you soon.
Hello and welcome to Car Design Dialogues Europe. I'm James McLaughlin, CDN editor, and I'm delighted to be joined by Carl Gotham and Rob Lemons from Chinese auto giant SAIC. Between them, Robert and Carl head up SAIC's Design Advanced London studio, and where they are design director and head of design respectively. Hello guys, welcome.
Hi James. Hi James.
Hi. I thought I'd start with a quote, if I may, from Xiao Jingfeng, who's your design VP. And I think it sort of introduces you guys quite well in the London studio. And he described this. This was an interview he did with us for Car Design Review, which is our annual sort of yearbook. And he said the new central London studio will focus on worldwide avant-garde design, leading creative work. It aims to become one of the world's best and most creative advanced design studios. No pressure, guys. But I thought that might be a good place to start for you guys to sort of elaborate a little bit more about what you do in the London studio and what your relationship is with head office, I suppose, as it were.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's so we're in the studio today in central London, and obviously a pleasure to be talking to Car Design News.
Lovely to have you. It's a great studio as well, by the way.
Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, we've been here since September 2018 in this studio, which was purpose built, if you like, the environment we're in now, to basically serve, as you said, to become a leading component of the SAIC Motor Corporation and the design department. So really, kind of using this location and the environment we're in to really push forward the design proposals and offerings that we can feed back into the system in China. So obviously, yeah, as you know, you've spoken to Xiao previously. Very driven, very ambitious company and design team. So yeah, this was set up to really try and give a different perspective on the sort of global design input. As you may know, some of the viewers may know, we did have a studio in Birmingham previously. So actually, there's been a design team in the UK for just over 15 years, actually. So quite a long time for a Chinese company to have an overseas design department. And the decision was made beginning of 2018 to open the facility here in London. So the company owns the building. We're here with MG actually on another floor, so we're also quite closely linked with the MG UK department, focusing on the growth of the brand. As you may have read, MG is doing very well in the market at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of our remit, is to push and be free a little bit of the production side of the business and focus on creativity. Attracting the best talents here in central London, and feeding that back into the China operation. So that's we in terms of how it works with China. We have a regular dialogue. I think we've independently both spoken to our colleagues in China at least twice today, several occasions before this interview. So it's fairly simple. Yeah, we're obviously in close contact with the team over there and with VP Xiao Jingfeng. So yeah, we're feeding in, and it's a sort of as close as you can be, based 5,000 miles apart, as it were.
Yeah, during pandemic as well. You mentioned that 15 years. It is a long time to have a presence here. Why the London studio now? I say now, but it's quite a recent addition. If you look at that timeline, what was the thinking there?
Yeah, well, I think it was an opportunity as much as anything. This facility was available, so we took the opportunity to put the team in here to do the kind of research and development away from a lot of the sort of bigger infrastructure of the business. So obviously, we are quite independent here. We're a team of 20, and we're fairly independent. We have to do everything from start to finish on our own, which is great. I mean, it's incredibly liberating in that respect from a creative point of view. So, and it does allow us to push on the envelope a lot more. But in terms of timing, it was just the right time, I think. Obviously this venture, this enterprise, if you like, was kind of obviously sanctioned by Xiao, and in conjunction with myself, kind of talking about how do we evolve the UK design team from being something that was 15 years ago was the only component of design in SAIC for the cell phone brands of MG and Roe, through to today where, like any OEM business, it's growing. It needs to kind of diversify and expand its team, keep pushing on those kind of fresh ideas and new inputs. So really that's what this was about, setting something up that could be different to what is happening in Shanghai.
And in terms of you guys' involvement with SAIC, what about your own design history, Rob? How long have you been with the company?
Oh, I've been with the company 9 years. Yeah, 9 years. 2012. 2012. Yeah.
2012.
So we are the veterans of the studio, sure. Yeah. So that's when I first started working with Carl in Birmingham, and then obviously came to London when the studio opened. But yeah, it's been a good 9 years. Yeah.
And veterans, does that mean that you're sort of, when you look at your 20 employees, are you feeling your age slightly, or is there other people fairly close to you in experience?
Well, I sometimes feel my age, yes, definitely, yeah. But that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I think probably, like you were saying, Carl, fresh ideas often come with new generations of talent. So I suppose the obvious thing to ask you is, both car designers, what models have you worked on?
So I mean, obviously I've been with the business for a bit longer than Rob has, and kind of in those first several years, heavily involved with majority of the cars that were building the portfolio, if you like, of SAIC under the MG and Roe brands. So things like the MG3 and MG5, the GS, which was the precursor to the HS, which we also worked on. In terms of show cars along the way, things like the Concept 5 were a bit of a highlight, in the MG0 concept, which was the concept car for the MG3. So I was responsible for the interior on that. So I actually started out as an interior designer, and I think through the opportunities of working for a new company, I mean, I think probably a lot of people will recognise that now, because there are a lot more startup companies and new brands around. So they do offer a new opportunity for people, for designers. So I was fortunate enough to come in as an interior designer and got the opportunity to work on exteriors, and eventually sort of ended up in the position I'm in now. Never sort of sitting still within the business, because there's always a new challenge in a growing organisation. So yeah, it's fair to say we've worked on a lot of things, and then probably the most recent thing we can sort of talk about openly at the moment is probably the Roe Vision I concept, which was shown in Shanghai 2019.
Yeah, 2019, yeah.
Yeah, 2019. So Rob was the main lead designer on that project, but that was probably the first kind of output of the studio here. And then obviously the things we're working on now, we're doing lots of, like we're in advanced studios, so we're doing lots of concepts and studies that aren't yet in the market, but certainly having an influence on what's happening in Shanghai. So yeah.
With the Roe Vision, guys, that was an automated vehicle, if I'm remembering correctly, and I just wondered how you see that sort of sphere of design increasing and becoming more prevalent.
Say again, sorry.
The autonomous design sphere, in terms of autonomous cars.
Yeah, well, that's obviously going to be a very important part of the industry in the near future, and I think we're still very far away from being completely autonomous. But the first steps towards that are definitely being explored, and that was part of the reason we had this concept car as well in Beijing. Just to test the waters a little bit and to see where we can take things in terms of future family vehicles. And Yeah, but I think in terms of the real autonomous cars, I think it's gonna be a while. Yeah.
Going back.
But you never.
Yes, I mean, true. I mean, if you look at some of the ideas that have been put forward, I mean, wheels are no longer necessary, and we are going to be flying. But so, autonomous vehicles feel a bit closer than that reality.
Yes. Yeah.
I just winding back slightly to the MG3, and it was interesting for as a fan of the MG brand to see it return, but not in a sports car form, in a kind of super mini form. Do you mind sort of sharing a little bit of the insight about that, why that direction was taken?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it comes down to, obviously, growing business needs to satisfy a portfolio, and actually the that segment of car, which is still, let's say, relatively affordable and can be a lot of fun. Actually, an MG3 is a great car to drive. And handling wise, characteristics, it's a really nice car to drive around town. But clearly it's not a sports car, and it's not necessarily what a lot of people that are familiar with the MG brand would expect. But I think from a design point of view, obviously we are we're looking at all sorts of things, and we have been throughout the last 15 years, and it's just a matter of timing. As we know, the sort of sports cars in the sort of lower end of the segment, become quite difficult for businesses to sort of make work. And I think what we'll probably see is the introduction of sort of cheaper electrification. Might unlock some opportunities in the future to achieve some of those kind of products that we'd like to see with the brand. So we've got a concept in coming in Shanghai in April, which will certainly sort of hopefully pique everybody's interest in that respect. Yeah,
that does actually sound quite promising as a fan of the old roadsters and sports cars. In terms of your design journey, you've mentioned a couple of models, obviously the MG3, MG5, and the MG HS, which was a kind of I would say quite a rapidly improving sort of vehicle, and that one really impressed. Well, pretty much everyone, I suppose. So I just wondered whether you were a design studio that's really finding its feet.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. Well, I think you've got to remember that the company, in essence, although it's SAIC is a huge organisation, as you sort of touched on at the start. China's largest car manufacturer. It has partnerships with General Motors and Volkswagen, which it's had for decades. So there's a lot of expertise in China within the group side of the business, but what we're focused on, which is the cell phone brand part of the business, it is only 15 years old, so it's still quite young. And I think if you compare that historically to other brands that have sort of come up through over the years, actually it's achieved a huge amount in a very short space of time. The quality is incredibly high, and I think a lot of that's driven by the competitiveness of the market in China, which is probably, unless you're in it and unless you're working for it and it well, it's maybe not that visible over here, but it is incredibly competitive. There's so many brands in China and so many products to choose from. There is no option but to keep elevating the level of design, the level of quality. So that's really what we're focused on, and we're quite driven to always try and achieve, better than the last thing we worked on every time. There's always a continual push to keep evolving. So it's a really exciting. It has been and continues to be a really exciting kind of journey, even though it is over a decade long. It still feels very fresh because there's always sort of a change and there's always something unexpected or a new challenge around the corner. So it does make it really interesting.
I suppose a question I could ask you this, Rob, but it's equally for both of you, considering your involvement with SAIC. it does feel like, because there isn't this kind of 50, 60, 70 years of design heritage, or you could argue baggage, I suppose. What sort of opportunities is that presenting you guys?
Well, I think the opportunities are enormous, but as you just said, there is a history, obviously, especially with the MG brand, which is positive, but it can also be a bit confusing sometimes, because the brand is obviously going through a bit of a change, and the markets have changed, and everybody knows there's been a period where it wasn't all too fantastic. But there was a fantastic heritage back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then to reimagine that brand now is both super exciting and full of opportunities, but it's not that straightforward.
But I think James, the point of the going back to the sort of heritage aspect of the brand and the type of products, I think the brand is growing, and with that comes confidence and also thinking about the next kind of chapter and stages for the brand. I mean, it's been kind of widely publicized that the business has got an ambition of getting 1 million vehicle sales overseas by 2025, which is a huge ambition, but that is in line with the sort of ambitions that we kind of objectives and targets that we get from the company. So actually, yeah, it's growing at a really kind of impressive rate in most overseas markets at the moment, and again in China, it's back on top of where it was before we had the sort of recession in China, if you like, or the slowdown of the economy. Sorry, recession, but slowdown of the economy, and the coronavirus situation obviously as well has had a fairly major impact on car brands, as we know. So.
And how receptive is the Chinese market to new ideas? When you take some, because obviously you're at the bleeding edge, if you like. When you take some of these concepts over, present them. Is there a particular way you have to frame them, or is it just a real hunger for innovation and new ideas?
Yeah, I think it's kind of linked a little bit to, I guess, the autonomous aspect. It's sort of, there is definitely a reception in the market there for new and novel and innovative, as you've said. And I think we can feel the influence back on some of the European brands, particularly at the moment as well. Who are obviously trying to get success in China. So yeah, it's not been it's not a straightforward thing to try and understand the market, which is actually relatively new in terms of being able to sort of get exposure to it, but also the car culture there is in its infancy. It's it's probably, in terms of mainstream car culture, it is 15, 20 years old. So people haven't grown up with the sort of heritage cars, the kind of romantic side of cars that we know and love, and why we got into this business in the first place. In China, it's very much it's a new thing. Touchscreens are standard and they're expected in every car because that's all anybody's ever known. So it's quite sort of it's quite a different market to design for sure. But the opportunities, therefore, are actually really wide open. And I think that's what Rob was saying before. With a brand such as MG, which has got history, Chinese owned, it's now selling in over 65 markets around the world. So it's actually as more successful than it's ever been as a car brand. Yeah. And yeah, it is this kind of interesting dichotomy we've got to try and sort of thread the sort of the design direction appropriately. So
Rob, yeah, I feel like you could jump in, but you not necessarily have to.
I happily jump in. But I think Carl is explaining it very well.
Okay. I think, moving back, I suppose, to the London studio itself. We just heard I think car siren, ambulance or a police car flying through there, which does assure our viewers that this isn't a pretend backdrop you have there. It is actually, you are actually in the Marylebone studio.
Yeah.
But it's a fairly young office, as I understand. But I wondered, how do you work together? How much time is devoted to research? How much time is devoted to designated to sort of pure design? How do you sort of what's your sort of methodology when you're working together as a studio?
Well, yeah, like I say, we have got a young team, and I still consider myself relatively young, and so does Rob. So
yeah.
But so we've got sort of we have got a broad kind of age group, but a lot of the team are a few years out of university, but we've got some experience, obviously, to be able to sort of mentor and to grow that team and to make sure the level is increasing. As I've said, that's what we're here to do. So, being a team of 20 means we work incredibly closely. You can sort of see the studio environment behind. It's an open space. It's actually very I want to say it's relaxed, but a lot of hard work goes on here. There's a lot of late nights. There's like any design studio. But we do kind of encourage a relatively relaxed environment to get the most out of people, because I think that's really important. You've got to allow people to sort of let their guard down a little bit in order to get the best out of them creatively. So that's kind of really a lot of the core philosophy of what we do. And in terms of the aspects of how things are structured, we work across a number of areas within the studio. Obviously, we're primarily, our primary job is to sort of study the future design language for both MG and ROE, as well as the R brand, which has been launched in the last year. So the R brand is an EV only brand, sister to ROE, kind of slightly more expensive offerings and pushing the kind of technology aspect. So there's essentially 3 brands that we work for now, and aside from that, we do concept studies. So they are things obviously that are not necessarily destined for production, or they might be things that we want to provoke within the company, to get the company to think about, which we do in the studio here, and then also things that, obviously, research activities, which we work closely with universities and other sort of agencies as well in this part of the world to to get a sort of another perspective on what's happening, what's going on out in the mindset of designers and the market. So it's essentially we're a very close team. Obviously, we're in the midst of a sort of remote working period, so that makes things a little bit more challenging, as you can imagine. But we are a digital studio, so we've kind of been able to sort of flick the switch in terms of remote working quite seamlessly, I would say. We're still, I would say, kind of maintaining well above a 95% efficiency on what we were doing when we were at the studio. But obviously, we were lacking those kind of subtle interactions and the spark you get from being all together, and obviously the social aspect as well. So yeah.
And I imagine that I know you've been coping, as we all are, with the pandemic, but I imagine there's normally a sort of an exchange of a steady stream of people coming in from Shanghai and vice versa, and there's that kind of frisson where you have a steady exchange of ideas. So I presume that's not been happening for the last year, and I wondered how you had coped with that.
Well, I think it's a huge miss that or a loss that we can't travel at the moment. We have both visited China many times, and I think one of the important things in our relationship with the China studio is that personal interaction. So going there and having people coming over here, I think that always worked really well. We had designers and digital modelers coming to join us for a long time, and that is a shame that we can't do that right now. So we try to do that on social media and Zoom and all kinds of online meetings. As much
All
as
very familiar.
it's not the same. So and as Carl said, it's the same with the atmosphere in the studio as well. You can brainstorm online with each other, but it's not the same as sitting here with a cup of coffee and just or exploring London and go out and so yeah, let's hope we go back to some normality soon.
Yeah, I think this process has definitely sort of made the way we work. Everything is a little bit more formal and structured because you don't have those sort of casual walk past a desk moments or somebody coming to bring some just to get an opinion. It's sort of because we're sharing it through a screen. It tends to be done in presentation format and. Those kind of things are
not as casual.
It's not as casual. No. It's sort of pushed the formality up, which is also not necessarily a bad thing. But we've lost those sort of the nuanced kind of casual interactions. But
I remember
hopefully we can get back to a situation soon with our colleagues in China where we can obviously go to. Shanghai and likewise they can send people to the UK. So I know Xiao himself was talking about trying to get across this year. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But
I mean, it does feel that I don't want to jinx it, but it does feel like the light at the end of the tunnel is getting slowly bigger. Just before we go on to the next question, I should remind our audience, you guys watching in the chat, to get questions in the chat for Carl and Rob, because they're going to be around for live Q&A. I understand that you've made us taken the time, I suppose, during this lockdown pandemic period to install a clay modeling studio in the basement. I thought that was interesting. I wondered how central that was to your process and how it's going to enhance your creative output.
Yeah. Well, I think to have the ability to do clay models, whether it's scale or full size, is enormously important in the whole process. Whether it's at the beginning of a project and you start really quick sculpting, sketch modeling, or whether it's further down the line, I think it's a highly valuable tool to have still. Although we have done a lot of digital. I can't wait to start. The scale models and the pandemic ruined it a little bit, but it's up and running. I think it's very exciting. I think it's also for the younger, the more inexperienced designers, very important to understand 3D form by actually touching it. A lot of things are possible in Photoshop, but the reality is not always the same. So the end result of what we do is still a very serious product. So understanding that real 3D shape, I think, is crucial. So I can't wait to get our hands dirty, basically. Yeah.
Quite literally. In the new wave of talent, are they chomping at the bit to get their hands dirty too, as well?
Yeah, I believe they're quite excited about the prospect of the design of the clay studio. Yes. But you can tell with these younger people that they already know so many different software packages and ways to model their designs and to build their 3D models, which is really, really nice to see in this generation of designers. It's much more than what we had when we graduated. It's super important, but the clay as well. I think it goes alongside pretty nicely, and they are excited about it.
And how do you? You mentioned technology there, Rob. How large a role is VR and AR going to be playing in car design over the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think is it going to be the dominant thing, or is there always going to be a place for the clay model?
I hope there is always going to be a place for the clay model. I think there will always be a place for the clay model. I know that we are using VR on a regular basis a lot. It is helping our process. It is helping our process not only internally but also in the reviews with our audience in China. Understanding the 3D shape and the proportions better through VR is very important. So yeah, it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's been a fantastic tool for us, especially until because we've only done digital so far in this London studio. But yeah, I think there is a place for clay. I definitely hope so. Yeah.
I think absolutely. As Rob's mentioned, the VR we use it a lot. I mean, I'm using it when we're in the studio, almost daily to sort of check data. It's really good for just getting a sense of volume and making big decisions, and whether we're going in the right kind of direction. But obviously, you can't beat the touch and feel and look of a surface as it catches light in reality. Those things are really hard to replicate. But it is just it's a kind of another tool in the process. So it just helps to maybe make a decision a little bit quicker, so that then you can sort of use more of the time you've got left, because the times of development times are always trying to be short. So whatever tools we've got to try and sort of help refine the process and make those decisions and make the right decisions, then all the more for it. But we've got the scale model studio downstairs for exactly the reasons Rob said. To sort of further the development of what we're doing, to help the younger designers as well to sort of hone their craft in physical 3D and not just on a screen, because it can be quite frustrating when there's things that you can't pull it out of the screen of their computer. You sort of need to extract it. It's quite difficult. So
No, I agree. It's quite difficult to do a crit around a screen. I imagine. Not impossible. We've mentioned that you've you work a lot on developing concepts and things like that. And I suppose further to the VR point, or the idea of designing in the virtual space. Concept cars. The question I keep asking, and people keep asking me as well, is what role they will have going forward in this new landscape. I really don't want to fall back on the kind of what's become a cliche of the new normal, but it is it does. I mean, questions are asked when you've got these shows. There's no shows, and you've got show cars. Do we need to rethink the idea of the show car or the concept car?
It's a good question. I think for our particular, for the job that we do and for the market that we design for, primarily, obviously we are designing for MG as a global brand, but in terms of show cars, as we know, there's still an active show car scene in China. Shanghai's going ahead. Obviously, we had Beijing and Guangzhou last year, so it's sort of so there's still very much the show in China is still a really important component of the industry. So I think from that respect, there'll always be that sort of there'll always be that platform for the for the foreseeable, for the next few years at least. I think in Europe, obviously it's definitely more questionable because they've all sort of either been cancelled or long term or at least short term, reduced in size over the years. So, but we've seen lots of manufacturers taking alternative routes with unveiling concepts, to smaller events or more online, independent, or even digitally. Yeah. So I still think it's really important. Concept cars are really important to set a vision and an idea of to test something, to maybe have a little bit more freedom, obviously creatively, than we would if we were doing it for production in the next 2 to 3 years. So yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll certainly fight to keep them going. So.
Which leads me sort of fairly neatly into my final question, and that's about what we can expect to see at the show in Shanghai coming up. Yeah. What are you going to wow us with there?
Well, there are a number of things from the business which will be there from the SAIC brand. So as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, we've been directly involved with 2 of the cars that are going to be shown there. One of them is from the MG brand, which I'm sure will pull on a lot of the heartstrings of people that know and love the brand. But it's still, a very much sort of proposition that's looking forward, not looking back, because that's really important as well. The MG brand is new to a lot of people, so they don't know its history. So we need to make sure it's projecting forward in a positive way. And yeah, also we've been involved with there'll be other show cars from the other brands in the business as well. So which we've participated in the development of those projects. So, but yeah, so there'll be a couple of at least two show cars that
we've been heavily involved.
Will be of interest. Yeah.
Good show. Well, we'll be there actually. We'll have a correspondent on the ground there, so we'll making a beeline for your guys' stand.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'll be there, but this rate obviously. But
it does. Maybe Beijing, but maybe not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us today at Car Design Dialogues. Really, really appreciate you making the time and coming to speak to us about the studio. Just to say we'll be right back and stick around because the guys are going to be taking live questions from you, the audience. But all that remains for me to say at the moment is thanks very much and see you. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back. Thanks, guys, for that conversation by the magic of television. That was pre-recorded, so here we are live. Just in case everyone's getting confused by the slight change in backdrop. Anyway, just before we to take part in our poll at the moment, it's running. If you want to vote on the differentiator of car design or how you differentiate your brand, there's a few opinions flying around in there. Digital interfaces is leading at the moment, but that could change. Anyway, on with the Q&A, guys. We spoke about lots of different things there. The studio, they're dealing with the pandemic, show cars, all sorts of stuff. But one of the questions that leapt out at me from the audience was to do with the pandemic and how you guys had managed to carry on designing and carry on innovating, and specifically what did you have to change to continue to sort of innovate?
Yeah, hi, James. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know whether we brushed on it in the interview or not, but obviously, we were kind of really well prepared in a sense with the pandemic coming, just because obviously, it started in China. They experienced it, so we were sort of experiencing it from a distance before it hit Europe. And I think we'd sort of lined everything up really to almost flip the switch on working remotely. So that was fairly painless, I think. Rob, would you agree that was a fairly smooth transition? So I don't know if all the designers would agree, but yeah, certainly from our perspective, that's what we thought. But and in terms of how we're working, obviously, communication is that's paramount to what we do. It's paramount whether we're in the studio or away from the studio. So trying to keep the channels of conversation and exchange of ideas and dialogue is really, really important. So So yeah, we're regularly in touch with one another, reviewing work and discussing different things. Any changes that happen in with projects or planning, that gets communicated as quickly as possible to the team, so we can kind of realign everything. And it's so far it's worked well. Obviously, this is the third lockdown we're in, so yeah, third time lucky. I think we're probably getting a little bit better at it each time. So yeah.
And what about hiring new talent? Did it affect your ability to hire people?
Yeah, well, in this time, obviously the recruitment is still officially ongoing, which is a good thing. But it's not easy. It's not easy to meet people face to face. So that initial meeting goes online, but then the next steps are a bit tricky. But we try our best, and hopefully we're out of this soon. So yeah, it has changed. The whole process is a bit different now. It's a bit slowed down, but we'll get back to normal soon.
And what say I'm a young designer, or a young student, or just trying to start out and get a foot in the door in car design. What sort of skills are you guys looking for? What do you place the most emphasis on?
Go on, I'll let you say that.
Well, what we place the most emphasis on is obviously the creativity, the natural talent that you can spot in what I find very important in hand-drawn sketches. So is somebody able to actually draw? This was a bit easier to spot, I think, many years ago, before all Photoshop and Instagram and the portfolios these days become more fleshy. They do look better, but it's also more difficult to spot if somebody has that that natural talent to actually draw a car, because that's what we're doing end of the day. And do they have a sense of proportion and style? So that's something we look for. Plus, I think it's become more important these days for young designers to be able to, whether it's in a sketch form or not, but to do some 3D modeling, do a first translation of their initial ideas themselves. You see that happening a lot more now than in the past. So yeah, to give an example, maybe 15, 20 years ago, an exterior designer was just doing exterior design, and now there's a bit of a mix into other disciplines. And I think the whole modeling aspect is quite important, especially for a small team like us. So that's something that we look for. Yeah.
It's interesting, actually, when we look at sort of design education and skill sets. I mean, the idea of being pure automotive design or car design is kind of started to blur, and you see courses renamed now mobility and rather talking specifically about cars. And I wondered, the breadth, is it more about the breadth of skills now, or more about a kind of being able to turn your hand to a few different things rather than being a kind of almost like a soul focused on solely on exterior or interior? Yes,
is the short answer. Yes.
I think it's definitely a kind of case for both situations. I think for in our studio, in our situation, the size of the studio and the kind of work we do, we need that sort of flexibility and adaptability within the team. So yeah, as Rob said, a lot of our team are using and experimenting in new softwares. We've seen a lot of new digital software in recent years. Coming from the kind of games industry mainly, which is definitely kind of helping young designers to sort of express their ideas a little bit further, which we encourage in the studio, absolutely. So yeah.
It leads me quite nicely, actually, while we're on the subject of technology. A question here from Adrian on the chat, and he's asking, how often do you guys do design reviews in VR? Is it a weekly thing, or more like this sort of thing you roll out for an important design milestone?
Yeah, it's. I mean, we use it as a development tool effectively. So yeah, obviously we're not at the studio full time. So if we were at the studio in a typical situation, we'd be doing it, 2 or 3 times a week, I'd suggest on projects, just to check in on the development of data. At the moment, we're kind of going to the studio to use the VR setup when there's sort of key milestone points, key decision points. So it's a little bit less now, but hopefully when we get back to the studio soon, we'll be using it much more, extensively. So,
just as we were talking in the Q&A, that we left on a sort of note. We were talking about what was coming up at Shanghai, and I wondered if you could tell us any more about that. Are we going to see a roadster or a sports car from you guys there? It's going to be a bit more in tune with the original DNA of MG.
Yeah, we've got we've obviously, so I think it was kind of around about this time last year we sort of previewed some design kind of sketches, some preview sketches of a sports car. So that car has been in development and is destined for Shanghai next month. So it's all kind of coming together at the moment, and obviously at a distance as well, which is slightly frustrating because we really want to see it in the flesh. So that's what's heading for the show. So it should hopefully create a lot of interest for the brand. So
Rob.
Nothing more to add, really. That's what we can look forward to. And
I'm very sort of conscious when there's two people to try and balance out the conversation, but and not always. Are you designing on the pure EV skateboard platforms at the moment for any of your brands? Is that happening?
Yeah, we've got new obviously there's new architectures coming through, sort of electrified kind of architectures. So we're in the process of developing cars based on electrification. SAIC's got a really big push for electrification. It's already selling lots of cars in China, and we've got the ZS EV here, which is doing incredibly well for the brand here. So there's a dedicated factory that can produce 500,000 battery vehicles a year. So there's definitely a big push for that. So we're very focused on electrification, and the brand in Europe. So MG in Europe is really sort of in the last 12 months has reintroduced into Europe as a sort of new energy vehicle brand going forward. So.
There are a few more questions coming through. This is a more technical question, actually. What are you using to show surface and material on a precise level? Digital versus real, or combined, or purely virtual?
Rob,
I assume this is during reviews.
Yes, I think
kind of software we use.
Yeah.
We use VRED, we use RTT for the big presentations to show our designs. Obviously, a lot of Photoshop, and from a digital point of view, I think that is pretty much it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we've got. I mean, we mentioned in the interview about the clay studio as well in the basement. I think as we sort of develop the facility in London, which is obviously the longer term goal. We'll be sort of trying to get a little bit more crossover between where we are now as, heavily digital focused into sort of bringing back some of that physicality to the process. That's kind of an ongoing thing, really. But like Rob said, there's lots of tools. We're sort of dabbling with Unreal as well at the moment, like a lot of places. So obviously that's a really powerful tool which could benefit the process. So.
Just going back slightly to the MG, how do you see that brand evolving over the next half a dozen years? It feels like there's a bit of a milestone going on. Well, the milestone, there's going to be a sports car coming, but I wanted to know over the next half dozen years where we might see that brand go, and what specifically you guys' involvement with that will be.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, we're at the sort of leading edge of the creative process for all the three brands that I talked about in the interview, and MG in particular. Obviously, we're based here. The brand is from this part of the world, and is definitely on an increase. Sales are increasing month on month for the past 2 years for the brand in Britain. So it's a really positive future for it. I think definitely this sort of the future probably is like all brands getting to electrification, but with SAIC behind it, it's able to kind of achieve that fairly quickly. So I think electrification is definitely is going to be a big thing for MG in the future. And kind of diversifying the portfolio, offering more products and some more kind of interesting niche products perhaps as well. So we'll keep pushing for new ideas. So
Niche products, Carl. I'm intrigued by that.
Well, I think it's kind of hard. I mean, obviously we're an advanced studio, so we're trying to look for those sort of gaps and opportunities for the brand to stand out and to to create a unique offering effectively. So, which again, working for a Chinese brand or Chinese owned brand at least, that market is very open-minded. It's very innovative. There's a real push for creativity, and I think we're kind of moving out of that transition of sort of following to leading in the future with China. So yeah, I think that's kind of, it's probably as much as I can kind of say at the moment. But
no, fair enough. Just you mentioned that this hunger for innovations, hunger for new ideas. Are there certain sensibilities or things you need to bear in mind when you're designing specifically for the Chinese consumer? Are there certain things that you know that have got that will play well with that audience?
Well, I think that the need for technology and in-car gadgets in China is enormous. Maybe more so in China than in Europe. And as Carl said, we are selling globally for various markets, and we are expanding into Europe. So it's going to be interesting to see how that sort of levels out. But I think in China, it's very important that, as Carl mentioned in the beginning, it's quite young. Technology is always on the forefront and is very, very important. It's always been there in the last 15 years. So I think that the Chinese customer expects a very high level of technology. Mainly, yeah.
I mean, technology is an interesting question for us. I mean, I see sort of more and more, not a pushback, but a kind of a questioning of how much technology and how much information we really do need in the car. And then linked, I suppose, to this idea that perhaps, a car could be an escape from a screen or escape from, and it could be a bit of I've even heard the word mindfulness bandied around with the car interiors, which I've not necessarily, connected that with driving. But I wondered whether this is kind of, we're in a state at the moment where there's a kind of rush to get new technology in because we can, or there are possibilities, but there might be a kind of dialing back of that sort of information overload if it did indeed go in that direction.
Exactly. I think 5-10 years ago there was this real push to basically show and have all the technology very visible. Maybe we're going towards a time where we still have all the technology, because you still, the customer still expects that, but maybe we go towards more of a hidden technology. So it's all there, but maybe not so obvious in your face. Maybe that is a next step, and that could be quite interesting.
Great stuff. Carl?
Yes, yeah. I think agree with Rob. It's we're in a period now where it's all on show. It's all about showing that the technology's there. But I think as people get used to it, I think certainly from a design perspective, we don't really want to be sort of covering a car interior with screens. So So yeah, in the future, hopefully it can become a little bit more reductive and a bit more intuitive in a sort of less obvious manner. So yeah.
Great. Okay, guys, I would love to carry on, but I think we've come to the end now. That's our time is just about up.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure speaking to you, James. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Stick around for some of the event, and you guys watching, please stick around. We've got some fascinating panel discussions and design reviews coming up over the rest of the day. But for now, thanks to Carl and Rob, and see you in the next session.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Prefix is an award-winning organization and recognized leader in the creation of prototypes, full-scale props and mock-ups, and the most technically advanced concept vehicles for the automotive, aviation, and mobility industries. The company is also a source for contract manufacturing, low-volume specialty vehicles, production paint programs, and component assembly. With nearly 300 employees and 4 impressive Midwestern USA facilities, Prefix offers an extremely wide range of capabilities, providing clients with a one-stop shop of crucial services. Actively involved with advanced technologies relating to electric vehicles, autonomous transportation, and urban mobility, Prefix has the departments and skills needed to work with companies throughout the entire development process.